the farm. Oh, I have to consent to being recorded. 1 second. Continue. Okay. And you'll see that that farm with its fields, the structure of the house looks almost identical to the one that I photographed just last year. In fact, much will seem familiar to you as on this journey that will start tonight in 1412, which is exactly 698 years ago. I hope that familiarity will make you feel a closeness to Piero and his time that perhaps you haven't felt before, but you may wonder why start in that year. Because that is most likely the year that Piero della Francesca was born in San Sepolcro. His father, Benedetto, was a leather merchant, very anxious to better his position in society through accumulation of wealth and property, strategic marriages for his children and grandchildren, and active participation in city governance. So let's approach the city to see what young Piero would have seen. First is this broad valley where San Sepolcro is located, a rich agricultural area since before Roman times. As we move on, we'll walk past the river Afra on one side of town, seeing fields, fruit trees, and flocks of chicken and geese. And maybe an occasional San Sepolcran out for a walk. The Tiber River is on the other side of town, which I called the Tiber until I learned Italian vowels. And several of you may have made the walk from the city center to its banks. And Piero undoubtedly did too. I like to think of young Piero maybe even swimming in the river. The Afra and the Tiber join east of San Sepolcro to head south to the Tyrrhenian Sea. Let's pause and look at the map for a minute. And so this is the first of our pauses to allow you to kind of take in things on the map. So have you all found San Sepolcro? If you haven't, start at San Marino, head south, and it will be the first city on the right. Then Città di Castello, and so on, down to Perugia, Deruta, where we would all like to go again, and so on. And then finally down past Rome. But I have been remiss because I've not yet introduced you to our esteemed traveling companion and guide, Piero della Francesca, because he is going to determine where we go. Most experts agree that this sleeping Roman soldier is a self-portrait, a rather cheeky one, as James Banker pointed out to me, because who but a virtuoso would know how to paint themselves with their eyes closed? So let's assume that Piero looked like this with his eyes open. Now let's enter the city through the Port of Fiorentina, the gate that is located in the direction to Florence. Protective and defensive walls were prevalent in Piero's day. And those of you who've already looked at the links I sent, you'll realize there were so many walls in Italy. But an earthquake 60 years before Piero was born left only the gate itself, which you see in the upper slide on the left. It was the only part that was unharmed. So it had to be rebuilt. But we'll walk through, yes?
Excuse me, can you, at the top where it says slideshow, can you hit that?
Sure.
And then that way we'll have full screen, I think.
Okay. Let's see. From current slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I told you I'd need help with this.
No. Doing great.
Okay, so we're about to walk through this very ancient gate, and there's one of my very friendly mockingbirds. As you read on the slide, there were devastating earthquakes in 1352 and 1353. But the wall was rebuilt and the gate still stood. So now let's enter the city and see what comes next. So how would Piero have dressed for this journey? Well, maybe something like this once he was an established artist. Oh, my screen is doing something. Let me get rid of it. It won't advance. There we go. The city within the walls is the same size today as it was then, although many of the medieval buildings have had Renaissance and Baroque renos. His father's retail shops were located on the main street, heading away from the piazza in the direction of the Porta Romana, which I hope you can see on this map, off to the right. His shops were very strategically located near the palaces of the wealthiest citizens who he hoped would become good customers and perhaps even relatives by marriage. At Piero's, during the time of Piero, San Sepolcro, we had a population of around 5,000. So I think you can visualize yourself walking down the main street, the Via Septembra, for that passeggiata, and I have no doubt that it happened in Piero's day as well. If you go to the main piazza itself, you see the church, and if you go way to the bottom, the green area directly down is where we would find Margherita, and where many of you have had those wonderful meals. The main street, as I've said, was the same. The clay tiled rooftops were the same if you subtract the television antennas. As he goes on down the street, you might encounter a woman spinning in a sunny doorway, and it's a technique that went back millennia. Indeed, the Greeks were doing very much the same thing. These are the colors he would have seen people wearing, all obtained from natural materials like the plant woad, which yielded a blue dye, or walnut husks, which if boiled will yield a nice brown, or iron, which will give you the color that you get from North Carolina clay. Now, I've noted down here on the bottom of the slide that mordants can change a color dramatically. So when you look at the colors of the yarn arrayed here, you're seeing in the vertical rows colors obtained from the same dye material that have had different mordants used with them. So in other words, if you throw some rusty nails in the pot, you're going to get a darker color. So enough about mordants for now. I'm sure there were small street dogs then, but there were certainly a lot more horses than now. A communal battalion of citizens was issued crossbows should the need arise to defend the city. And we see them marching on the left and performing on the right. And we have a little video right now. I hope most of you have been in San Sepolcro and had the opportunity to watch and applaud the Spandatori. They, of course, when they do their mock battle scenes with their banners, are actually practicing moves that would have been used in battle, in a sword fight. So let's go on now. Oh, we have a time traveler inviting us to come inside. Let's go in Piero's house. His family had lived on the same corner since the 1300s, and lucky for us, lunch is waiting. And surprise, it's the same good wine, meat, pasta, cheese, and olive oil that we enjoy today. Oh, and look at those truffles in the upper left corner. It makes my mouth water. In small family gardens and larger plots are the ingredients from one of my favorite soups, cavolo nero or black cabbage. And those of you who've looked at the links I sent, there is indeed a recipe for that in one of those links. As night falls, you might encounter a religious procession or one organized by a community confraternity, charitable societies like the Misericordia, who ran a hospital and were the volunteer ambulance corps of Piero's time. The cathedral building we see today was a mere 200 years old in Piero's day, and the St. Benedict frescoes in the cloister were new during Piero's century. And I'll pause for a second since we've been walking briskly down the street and let you read the slide. Against his father's wishes, Piero, the oldest son, chose not to join his father's family business to increase their fortune and not to marry to increase their social standing. These tasks were left to his two younger brothers, who did both quite successfully, but instead he became a painter, a person who worked with his hands, menial labor, and an uncertain income. This may explain why from the time Piero left San Sepolcro to go to Florence in 1439, he rarely returned home during the next decade. Can you imagine the conversations with Dad at the dinner table? Best to stay away. So, where did he go? We'll be following Piero to all of these places. And I'm going to let you read my little chart here and then try to pick out some of the cities on the map. Now, as you can well imagine, the roads were not all perfect then, so it probably took longer, maybe quite a bit longer. But Anghiari would have definitely been possible, even if you just walked. So, having mentioned Anghiari, how did Piero become a painter? After working in his family business doing accounts as a teen, which was his mathematics education, he apparently studied with some local artists, most likely one from Anghiari. In 1438, Piero was working as an assistant in Perugia to Domenico Veneziano, an established painter, although one not much older than Piero. Was he a good painter? Well, oops, we went backwards instead of forwards. Okay, now I'm still going backwards, backwards, backwards. Oh dear. Okay, forwards, much better. Backward in time when I didn't want to. And now we seem to have leaf blowing going on nearby. So I was asking you if Venezia was any good as a painter. And yes, he was. And is still considered one of the foundational early Renaissance style painters. You can see how innovative he was when you compare a painting done by Veneziano's teacher, Gentile da Fabriano from Siena, which you see, whose work you see on the left, and whose work retains so many Gothic characteristics: the gold background, two-dimensional depictions of space, and a decorative surface rather than a volumetric treatment of forms. Veneziano is credited with painting the first Sacra Conversazione, or sacred conversation, where the figures are not separated by wooden frames, but proportional and in the same space with the Virgin. He was a modern painter from the Renaissance. So Piero went off to Florence with Veneziano in 1439, not as an apprentice, but an assistant, which means he must have already demonstrated skill and a high degree of competence. There he painted frescoes in Santa Maria Nuova Hospital, which was already 150 years old. Unfortunately, only fragments of what they painted remain. And as you look at the text on the slide, you'll see it was founded by Dante's Beatrice's father in 1288. But Piero wasn't just there to paint, he was there to see things, and the things he saw. First of all, Brunelleschi's dome for Santa Maria della Fiora, which we all call the Duomo because of the dome, was absolutely brand new. Donatello was working in Florence, and as it says on the slide, he created in the 40s the first full-scale nude sculpture since classical times. Masaccio's Holy Trinity had been painted the previous decade using new ideas about linear perspective, a way to create the illusion of deep three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface, and Piero absorbed lessons in depiction from all of these artists. I'm going to let you pause for a minute and read the text. Okay, I'm going to move on. Among other artists in Florence, Leon Battista Alberti, maybe related to Alberti's, but I don't really know, had written a book on painting perspective, but only through descriptions, not diagrams, as that was the educated classical way to do such things, not resorting to that dreaded manual labor of actually drawing them. Piero did not have a classical education. He had learned math through his time spent in his father's business and had access to classical writing through relatives of the courts where he worked later. He was to bring the two ways of thinking together in his books that he wrote later. Leonardo was not yet born, but this is his first portrait painting. It can be seen in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. And pardon me for saying so, this is a little bit heretical, but I think it's a little meh. Michelangelo was born 63 years after Piero, and he was a sculptor even when he was painting. Raphael was born 71 years after Piero, but it's possible that Piero met toddler Raphael when he stayed with the boy's father during his last trips to Urbino. Piero saw all of this in Florence, and I'll let you read. Of course, the Ponte Vecchio would not yet have had the Vasari corridor. As you look at the image on the right, that yellow third floor that goes across the bridge that leads from one Medici palace across the river to another. But it would have had butchers on the ground floor tossing carcasses into the river. Vecchio, by the way, simply means old. So we're looking at the old palace and the old bridge. Then Piero left Veneziano and Florence for commissions of his own. Piero's commissions for the rest of his life tended to be either for religious entities or for independent warrior nobles who had carved out land holdings, many kingdoms. We'll visit the latter first, then pick up with Piero's religious commissions. From here on, our journey will not be strictly chronological because Piero returned to some clients over the years and often temporarily stopped work on a commission to accept another elsewhere. However, he has a much better record of actually finishing than Leonardo, and that's my last jibe at Leonardo, I promise. So I'll let you read what I've written here and then talk about it a bit more. The condottieri, or mercenary leaders, fought and married their way into power and noble titles. Such was the case of the d'Asti family in Ferrara. Unfortunately, once again, only fragments remain of Piero's work for them. However, if you've not yet visited there, I highly recommend it both for a castle and city tour and the food. I still dream about the food I've had in Ferrara. Ferrara underwent a massive urban renewal during the Renaissance to model new ideals in city planning. Broad, straight main streets instead of narrow, winding warrens, typical of medieval cities. So let's take a look. And I did something wrong again. Back. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the Italy of Piero. And I'll let you again take a glance at that map before I start talking. So how this worked was the Papal States might hire a condottiere to fight the Medicis in Florence, unless the Pope happened to be a Medici, and then he would hire one to fight someone else. You might hire one to fight the Ottomans, or you might, if you were the Duke of Milan, hire one to lead an army against a rival. This map doesn't show the smaller kingdoms, but we will see the cities where they were located. And if you look right above or kind of enclosed by Papal States, you'll see Urbino, which is a very important place for Piero. But the first place we're going to go, and this is still more or less chronological for Piero, is to Rimini. And I'll let you read this quote. Rimini was an early stop for Piero and the center of the condottiere Sigismondo Malatesta's realm. Let's meet Sigismondo. Observe who is the focal point when Sigismondo allegedly pays tribute to Saint Sigismund. It gives insight into Sigismondo's ego. The profile portrait on the right is evidence of the classical obsession that swept through these courts. This pose is deliberately reminiscent of that of a Roman emperor on a coin. But we're moving on to one of Sigismondo's rivals. Piero had a long-standing relationship with the Duke of Urbino, Federico da Montefeltro, who seemed several notches above the other condottieri in intellect, taste in art, and even devotion to his wife. His palace in Urbino is a marvel, although little of the artwork he collected remains there. So let's meet him and his wife. Meet the Duke and Duchess. She is very pale for either A, fashion, and a pale complexion was admired, or B, to show that she was already dead when this was painted, a convention in painting that lasted hundreds of years. The next time you're in the North Carolina Museum of Art, look at the oh so ghostly white mother in John Singleton Copley's The Pepperell Family, painted 1778, to see proof of this. The Duke lost an eye in a joust, which accounts for the unusual bridge to his nose and the profile which he chose to have shown. He was mortal enemies with Sigismondo Malatesta, who he ultimately defeated. Raphael's father was court painter to Montefeltro, and when Piero was in residence for a commission in Urbino, he stayed at his house, a very nice one, a few blocks from the palace, that you can visit today. Not today, but the next time we're in Italy. This is called the Brera altarpiece because it's in a museum in Milan called the Brera, but it was not called that in its day. Note the brilliant metallic sheen on the Duke's armor and how very deep the space is in the alcove behind the Virgin, and how classically inspired. Here you see the alcove of Masaccio's Holy Trinity carried to the next level of execution. The Flagellation of Christ is undoubtedly the most puzzling of Piero's paintings because of its unusual composition and obscure meaning. Why is the flagellation scene so small and in the background? Who are the large figures in the foreground and the center one looking rather pale again? James Banker offers a convincing explanation in his book, Piero della Francesca, Artist and Man. And I've also given you information about that in the links that I sent. On to Rome. Was this for religious commissions? Yes, but the Pope had an army, so we're straddling the fence between Piero's two types of clients. Piero's work here was destroyed, except for, again, a few fragments, when Pope Julius II redecorated and wanted new Raphaels instead of old Pieros. Julius is the Pope who made Michelangelo paint that ceiling. We're getting closer to home when we move to Perugia, and home, of course, is San Sepolcro. Perugia was a hotly contested city through most of its history, with centuries of bloody strife for control. Piero completed a lovely altarpiece here, now in the National Gallery of Perugia, but may well have been happy to leave the city and its endless political intrigues. While in Perugia, he would have seen the Nicola and Giovanni Pisano fountain, close to 200 years old at the time, but the cathedral behind the fountain was still under construction until 2 years before Piero's death. Its facade remains unfinished to this day. But there is no place like home. After the 1440s, Piero seems to have returned home more often to participate in family and community, to work on his manuscripts on perspective, and probably for the peace and quiet away from home. As it says here, rather early he was elected to the city council, but never held the top position like his father did. Just like us, Piero undoubtedly found Monte Casale a restorative retreat. And those of you who've been there, can you smell that fresh air? Ah, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture of the dog. To another city, nearby Monterchi, is still the location of the Madonna del Parto, the pregnant Madonna. He was not unique in painting a pregnant Madonna, but his depiction was unusual. It was originally painted for a small country church in this, his mother's hometown, and probably shortly after her death. Note the use of the mirror image angels to left and right, made possible by flipping the cartoon, a full-scale drawing used to place the images on the wall. So let's see more of the Madonna and have a bit of a comparison. So here is the Madonna del Parto on the left, Piero's somber young Madonna whose back obviously hurts, standing inside a womb-like tent. And next to her on the right is a photo of Raphael's fashionable upper-class socialite picnicking with baby Jesus and little John. Which one of these speaks to you more deeply and sincerely? And is my opinion obvious? We'll now circle around. Sorry, I did it again. And again. Oh, and again. I'm so sorry, folks. I'm hitting the slide in the wrong place and it's not wanting to advance. There we go. You got to look at that Madonna a little longer than I intended. I hope you enjoyed it. We're circling around San Sepolcro to go to Arezzo now. And we're looking at the Basilica of San Francesco, as you can see, finished in 1290. I have a very short video clip to show you of Arezzo. So I'd like to get you oriented first. We are all standing with our backs to the train station in this video. The small Roman amphitheater is off to your right, although you won't be able to see it. We will look up the hill past San Francesco Basilica, which you just saw, to see the cathedral at the pinnacle. I'll show the video twice, so look for those landmarks as we go up the hill. And one more time. Oh, and that was a mistake again. And that is a mistake again. You're getting a preview. Oh, no, 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 no. Help. Help, help, help. It just keeps going forward. What do I need to do?
Well, you need to go back. So, click down there. There you go.
Okay, we're going back, we're going back, we're going back. Okay, lots of previews for you. I was going to show you that video again, so let me compose myself and I'll show you the video one more time. Oh no, we went forward instead. Don Rose would say, a disaster. Did you see the cathedral that time? Okay, we're going to stop right here, and I want you to notice how closely those buildings on the left resemble the buildings you see in the picture on the right. And can you guess when this apartment was built? Some of you may know. It's actually a reconstruction of a Roman apartment building. One more reminder of how little some things have changed. Now we're going to go up the hill to the cathedral, which you got to do very quickly a second ago. We're going here to see Mary Magdalene particularly. As you look at Mary on the right, you'll see that her hair draped across her shoulders is still wet from drying Jesus' feet. She's young, she's fresh, unsullied by life or sin, a figure of monumental substance. Back down the hill to San Francesco Basilica is the location of one of Piero's most celebrated frescoes, the Proving of the True Cross. Although Napoleon soldiers didn't think much of it, they used it for target practice while they were billeted there. I'm going to take a longer pause on this slide and the next to let you read and look. In the next slide, you'll be able to see more clearly that comparison that he painted from side to side. If we look at the left, I'll let you read this and then I may point out a few things to you. I know it's difficult to see the images that are on the sides, but I hope you will look further, find out more about this wonderful, wonderful painting. And I hope if you've not had a chance to see it yourself, that you will have that opportunity. Now, finally, home to San Sepolcro. Piero did spend increasing amounts of time in San Sepolcro as his father aged and accepted that his son had achieved renown, while his other sons had made the family both rich and approaching the upper echelon of local society, even marrying into the oldest noble families like the Pici. Piero also had important commissions here in San Sepolcro, and he wants to continue writing his books on perspective and mathematics. The two intertwine for him because his books contain descriptions and drawings. even how-to instructions. The family house is where it has always been and where it is today, although enlarged through a bequest of an adjoining property during Piero's lifetime. Approximately 20 people lived here, his two brothers' families, Piero, and some servants. While it looks like it has only 2 stories in this view, it has, in fact, more. The lot slopes steeply down to the back entrance. Those of you who've been there know those stairs are right to the left. And it has more stories than you can tell from this photo. It's quite spacious and at least as lovely as Raphael's family home in Urbino. After a lengthy restoration, finished in 2018, the house was open to the public as part of the Museo Civico, the town's art museum, and it is well worth a visit. And shall we go in? The door is open. But instead, after a quick visit, let's go down the block to the Museo Civico itself, housed in a former municipal building that Piero would have gone to for town council meetings. This is the location of the 2 works that we've saved for last. We're looking at the Madonna della Misericordia. Although commissioned in 1445, apparently Piero didn't start work on the commission until the 1450s. We know this because James Banker's research found receipts that disclosed that Piero didn't request payment for supplies to start the painting until then. And I don't know of an artist who was to be paid for supplies who wouldn't have asked for the money. The pose of the Madonna sheltering and protecting is a common depiction. In fact, there is a sculpted version in the North Carolina Museum of Art. But let's take a closer look at the figure of Saint Sebastian, the one pierced with the many arrows on the left, for a little comparison. Oop, and I went backwards again. Okay, there we go. As it says, this is Piero's only known mythological work, and it was in fact located in his own house. So it was not a commission. But if you look at Saint Sebastian on the right, and then look at Hercules on the left, you could see that they could be twins. We once again see Piero using a cartoon to repeat a figure like he did with the angels in the Madonna del Parto. And now another comparison. If I move forward. And I did, very good. Once again, we see Piero's altarpiece and then Veneziano's that we saw earlier tonight. Why does Piero use so many old-fashioned styles of depiction? The gold background, the hierarchy of scale where the Madonna is a towering figure compared to those beneath her cloak, and the figures are rigidly separated by the now missing gold frames. Why? Is this artwork regressing? Not at all. It's painted this way because that's what the client wanted. Patron contracts with the artist could be very specific about what was to be included and how. This contract, issued by the Misericordia, specified the gold background, the format, and generous use of the most expensive blue pigment, ultramarine, ground from the stone lapis lazuli. Piero was an artist for hire, so that's what he gave his client. However, his figures remain marvelously three-dimensionally solid. Before we see the painting that is San Sepolcro's symbol and was its salvation in World War II, a few words about how it saved the city for those who haven't heard this amazing story. As the Germans started to retreat from Italy, a British airstrike had been ordered to demolish San Sepolcro because it was feared that it was still occupied by enemy forces. A young British captain, who you see here, Anthony Clark, was issued the command to obliterate the city. But he'd read an essay by Aldous Huxley, The Best Painting, about Piero della Francesca's resurrection, and knew that this masterwork was located in San Sepolcro. He delayed giving the order until it was known that the Germans had, in fact, abandoned the city. As they exited, they blew up the Torre de Berta, the medieval tower in the central piazza, mostly out of spite, it would seem. but that did allow all the wonderful gatherings they have in the piazza today. However, the painting, The Resurrection, was unharmed, and San Sepolcro still stood. So now, The Resurrection. In this painting, we see Jesus emerging from the tomb, a muscular warrior for Christianity, carrying a crusader's banner. Close examination will show that the background of half of the painting represents death, as you see on the left, as we look at the painting, while the other, the rebirth of life in the countryside, a countryside that, if we could look more closely, is clearly identifiable as Piero's Tuscany. The painting underwent a meticulous restoration completed 2 years ago. The bright colors are absolutely accurate. The architectural setting, of which you see just a little bit, the columns to the left and the right, are so convincingly painted that they could fool your eye even when you see the painting in person. So let's give the Resurrection another moment. But having traveled so far with Piero, and for such a long time, from 1412 until 1492, the year of his death, it's time to leave for now. Arrivederci, San Sepolcro, and buonasera, friends, until we meet again. It was worth repeating. Thank you for traveling with Piero and me, and thanks to Kathy Rogers for inviting me to return to Italy with all of you tonight. Ciao, ciao. And now I think Denise will unmute you, and if you have some questions, I'll do my best to answer them, or we may have people listening in who have even better responses than mine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Becky. That was wonderful. And I think there may be some questions that people might have. Becky, if you want to stop sharing the screen, then
right. Thank you.
Sure, then we can
stop the share. That's what I needed. The instruction I needed.
Oh, perfect.
I warned you about my PowerPoint capabilities or lack thereof.
I thought it went very smoothly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Professor?
Yes, sir.
Mario here. Professor, I have a question. You touched a little bit about his early interest in painting, but, you know, Sesbrook was off the beaten path, kind of little town. So how did he acquire the skill or training to advance his skills?
Well, if you go back to that travel chart I gave you, I had up there with the map, it wasn't really off the beaten path. It was a very prosperous market town. 5,000 people wasn't small. It wasn't that distant to the other places that of the larger places with, you know, that we think of when we think of the Renaissance. So there were artists practicing there. And I mentioned he probably worked with one from Anghiari, maybe also another artist who was based in Siena, but you know, Siena was not so far away. So he had some training enough to enable him to be recruited to be an assistant to an established painter.
Oh, great, great, thanks.
Another question?
Well, I'll just make a comment.
Okay.
For me, it's all about the geometry.
Ah, yes. And for that, I'm gonna hold up James Banker's book, Piero della Francesca, Artist and Man. If the geometry has puzzled you, you need to read his book because he manages to describe it in a way that I actually read every word.
Becky, several times you talked about it was presented in a cartoon. Can you explain that?
Oh, absolutely. The artist would have done all sorts of preparatory drawings, but when he had settled on the composition, he would have done a full-scale drawing, and that full-scale drawing would have been put up again. Oh, I'm gesturing with my hands that are off the screen. But he would have put that drawing up against the wall, perforated it, and if any of you sew, you know what a Dritz wheel is?
Yeah.
Little wheel that makes holes. He would have perforated it and then pounced it with graphite so that you had a dotted line that shows exactly where things were to be painted. So the cartoon was a drawing that he had and kept and sometimes reused. And like in the Madonna del Parto, he simply did it one way, then he flipped it over and used it the other way to get those angels. And for those of you who are attuned to color, I hope you notice he was using complementary colors of red and green, and he flipped their clothing colors, their predominant clothing colors from one to the other too. I thought that was kind of fun. Other questions?
Yes, wait a minute.
John's got a question.
I've got a comment and a question.
Okay, John, go for it.
I don't think I compliment you enough. I thought that was just wonderful. And if I had been taught art like that at school, I think I might have been much less anti-art than I'm not anti-art, but I'm not really into it. And I think that was very, very good, linking everything up together. And the question is a very small one. Did he ever paint any animals, cats, dogs? I think there was one animal in that picture of San Sepolcro with the, not the famine, with the plague, but maybe that wasn't a Piero picture.
No, that wasn't a Piero picture. That was painted before he was born,
Yes.
and the artist who painted that died in the plague.
Yeah.
In the 1300s. I don't recall any animals, but someone else can certainly correct me on that.
Becky, I want to say something. What still astonishes me is how you can be walking down the street of San Sepolcro and see a face that has walked right out of a Piero fresco.
So true.
It's just astonishing that the continuity of the population, and that there are still, because they're quite distinctive faces, that they are still in the streets.
Well,
are you thinking of Alessia, for example?
I am, and even more so, there's a banker named Malatesta, and one of Piero's paintings is the Duke of Rimini, who's a Malatesta. And when we saw him, we both, our mouths dropped open, and John said, "You know, you really look so much like a Piero figure." And then they started talking and introducing themselves. And when he said his name's Malatesta, I thought, of course you do. And then there is our electrician who is,
oh, be still my heart.
yes.
A reason in itself to return to San Sepolcro.
Yes.
Yes, let's not get started. Carolyn has a question.
Carolyn had a question about whether he reconciled with his father. Yes, he did. As Piero became famous and actually acquired renown and was hired by all of these people, his father went, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad choice. And as in his father's old age, Piero actually was in San Sepolcro almost exclusively, maybe exclusively, and pretty much took over as head of the family, taking care of family business. Other questions? it's really good to see all of you. Wish I could see you in person. It looks like we have no other questions, Denise.
Okay, any
Okay.
comments?
I wish we could have more lessons from Becky.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Very kind of you. Thank
It's
you.
just the truth.
I have one comment. So one, Dr. Bailey, thank you so much because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and just so nice to see you again because I graduated in '94. So it's nice to reconnect.
Yeah, and I remember you well.
That's funny. I was like, I don't even know if she knows who I am.
Absolutely, I remember you, Camille.
Well, good. Maybe we could connect in another
I would
setting.
like to do that. My
Awesome.
email is the same as it's always been,
Okay.
baileyr@meredith.edu.
Okay. Wonderful. And then I had a question about the art in terms of the art programs that are going on now, as to how well, I don't know who's coordinating it now, but how they're coordinating the student exhibitions. I didn't know if they are doing a virtual display of people's work or any adjustments like that.
Well,
For
I know Beth Mulvaney was on, and so I would like to defer to Beth, who can answer that in great.
Absolutely. We have exhibitions, and we have a reception and opening and a webinar that will be on Thursday, October 29th, and people can go ahead and sign up for it. They can also come to a reception. We do it socially distanced, and you get assigned a certain hour.
Mm-hmm.
We do quite a bit. So if you go to the Meredith website and to the gallery, you'll get information there where you can click on a link and go ahead and sign up, and we would love to have you there.
That would be wonderful. I'd really enjoy that. Like
Please
to see,
come.
We
the
need
work
you
that's
back
being
on
done
campus,
currently.
Camille. Oh, to come on campus, though, you do have to download an app where you tell the security guard, show him that you're healthy, and then you can come on campus.
Although they still let them on if they're coming for the exhibition.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, I think they just asked a series
Okay.
of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of coming on campus, in one of my other roles is as costume designer, sometimes for the theater department. The theater department is performing Medea, the Greek tragedy, in the amphitheater with live audience encouraged if you're healthy and if you have a mask and if you agree to distance like we will make you do. So please come. It's on being presented twice on Saturday and on Sunday, and then on Halloween weekend on Saturday. Twice.
And there's no charge for admission.
No. And it's a spectacle.
Vicky's costumes and masks are astounding. They really are.
Yeah.
Very
So
beautiful.
y'all come.
Melissa also thanks Melissa for doing that. I was fumbling around while Beth was talking, trying to get the link to the art gallery exhibition.
Good. Good.
But she put it in the chat for everyone.
Great.
And I do have to say one more thing. Becky's been doing these costumes, teaching a class, and she always makes things look as if they are so easy and effortless. But she has really put in the hours for this presentation, and you can tell it. And there's Kathy looking very relaxed in the middle of directing a play. So this is the Meredith way, all right? Faculty do work so hard.
Actually, I did not direct this particular production. Stephen did.
Smart.
I cannot take credit.
But
So.
Kathy directed one earlier in the semester. So that's why she's looking relaxed.
That's right.
Denise, are there
Yes.
any thoughts about doing more series like this to other places that Meredith has traveled, like Ireland or?
I actually, one of the things that I have thought about, and I probably shouldn't even mention it in this setting, but I will anyway. I actually had wondered if we might be able to take advantage of some alums who may be in those areas, who may be living abroad, who would actually do a tour. I know some universities and colleges are doing that. So anyway, we have, one of the nice things that we have found is we are reaching an incredible number of alums and an incredible, from incredible distances. So it's wonderful. It's been a wonderful thing. Who knew that virtual events would be so popular? And so, I mean, but it is such a great, it's been a really, really great thing for our office. So there's all kinds of ideas floating around. So be on the watch, be on the lookout. We have, we're planning, we're pretty much maxed out for this semester, but we're looking into the spring. So yeah. Okay. I appreciate everyone spending their last 4 Thursdays with us at 5 p.m.
Thank you for tuning in.
Sure. And I will be in touch soon with recordings, and you can rewatch and share as you would like. Okay? Thank y'all. Thanks, Becky. It was great.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Bye-bye,
very much.
everybody.
Denise, thank you so much for organizing us all, and thank you, Becky.
Sure.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
Sure.
I learned a lot.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.